Jewish Meditation by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, a practical guide.
Chapter 16, The Commandments. In the previous chapter, I discussed how even mundane acts can be made into an act of worship through which one can experience the divine. There are other actions, however, that are specifically designed to bring a person closer to God. These include the many commandments and rituals of Judaism. It is taught that the Torah contains a total of 613 commandments. The idea of keeping 613 commandments may seem overwhelming. Indeed, one must be a scholar to even be able to find all 613 commandments in the Torah. However, there are a number of published lists of the commandments, and a study of these lists will show that most of the commandments pertain only to special cases, special people, or special places. Thus, for example, a large number of the commandments deal with the service in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, which no longer exists, and even when it did exist, many of the rituals were the responsibility only of the Kohen priests. Other commandments involve agriculture or criminal law and have little bearing on the day to day practice of Judaism. Therefore, if one studies the commandments, it turns out that, for the most part, the practice of Judaism is defined by 3 or 4 dozen of them. These commandments define the structure of Judaism, and keeping them is what makes a person an observant Jew. Besides the commandments found in the Torah itself, there are numerous rituals and customs that have become an integral part of Judaism. A number of these were legislated by the ancient sages because they saw that an additional spiritual aid or dimension was needed by the Jewish people. The additional rituals provided this dimension and allowed the person to have a full spiritual life, even where it was impossible to keep all the commandments. Thus, for example, the Torah prescribes that all Jewish holidays be observed for one day. Later, when there was trouble fixing the calendar, it was legislated that festivals be kept for 2 days outside the Holy Land. On the surface, the reason was that there was a question as to which day the festival fell on. The Zohar, however, states that outside the Holy Land it was impossible to accomplish spiritually in one day what must be accomplished on a festival. Therefore, a second day was added so that one would be able to complete the spiritual growth implied by the festival. The same, to a large degree, is true of customs. The Talmud states that when the Jewish people adopt a custom, they are doing so on the basis of what is very close to prophetic inspiration. Witnessing the establishment of a custom, Hillel, 1st century BCE, remarked, "Let the Israelites follow their own course. If they are not prophets, then they are apprentice prophets." This suggests that people have the power collectively to feel a spiritual need and fill it. Therefore, even customs can contain a powerful degree of spiritual energy. It was also decreed that before performing many commandments and rituals, a blessing must be said. As discussed earlier, every blessing is a statement of God's immanence. However, since a commandment comes from God, it is also an expression of His will. As we have discussed earlier, God is identical with His will, at least on one level of understanding, and therefore God is uniquely present in His commandments. When a person performs a ritual mandated by a commandment, he or she has the opportunity to create a unique bond with God. All the blessings said over commandments have a common beginning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Blessed are you, O God, our Lord, King of the universe, who sanctified us with his precepts and commanded us. In the blessing, we state that God sanctified us with his commandments. In this statement, we recognize the commandments as a means through which God sanctifies our lives and raises us above the mundane. We see that the commandments are a special means that God gave us to experience the divine. When keeping any ritual, we should see it as an expression of our desire to be close to God. Here again, love provides a pertinent example. Imagine that you are in love. You are constantly trying to do things to please your beloved and draw closer to him or her. If the beloved makes a request, you may see it as a unique opportunity to express your love. There is no greater pleasure than doing something like that. The very fact that you are doing something that your beloved desires makes it a total act of love. The same is true of God's commandments. These are not acts that one does on one's own to express one's love for God, but acts that God has asked us to do as an expression of this love. If one keeps God in mind when observing a commandment, the experience can be one of overwhelming love for and closeness to the divine. Furthermore, since these are God's commandments, they are closely and uniquely linked to God's will. This expression of the divine will is every bit as real as the will through which God created the universe. Therefore, a commandment is every bit as real as a physical object. If one meditates on this, one can see the observance as something real and palpable, filled with the divine. When you keep a commandment, try meditating on the fact that God's will is in the commandment. In a deep meditative state, you will actually be able to feel God's will in the action and the fact that God and his will are one. Besides the blessings said before a commandment, there is another meditation that is recommended by the great Jewish mystics. It says, "I am doing this for the sake of the unification of the Holy One, blessed be he and his divine presence, with awe and love, in the name of all Israel." The term Holy One, blessed be he, Kutchabrichu, is a common Aramaic term used to denote God, found in both the Talmud and the Zohar. To understand the meaning of this meditation, we must understand why this particular term is used. I have explained that the word blessed, when applied to God, refers to his immanence. However, we must also understand what the word holy means when applied to God. Usually, when we say that something is holy, we mean that it is close to God or pertains to his worship. But what does the word mean when applied to God himself? When we use the word holy to describe a person or object, we are indicating not only that it is dedicated to God, but also that it is both separated and distinguished from the mundane. Therefore, when we say that God is holy, we are saying that he is separated from the mundane to the greatest extent imaginable. Therefore, when we say that God is holy, we are saying that he is utterly transcendental. In Judaism, there is always a tension between God's immanence and his transcendence. When we say that God is blessed, we recognize that he is holy, while when we say that he is holy, we are aware that he is transcendent. God is, as it were, both very near and very far. The Kabbalists express it by saying that God both fills all creation and surrounds all creation. On the one hand, he is immanent and fills all creation. No place is devoid of him. On the other hand, he surrounds all creation and is totally other than it. When we speak of God as the Holy One, blessed be he, we are saying that he is the transcendent one who is immanent. We are declaring that God is utterly transcendent, but that we can also experience him as being immanent. The term Holy One, blessed be he, therefore bridges the gap between God's transcendence and his immanence. It is as if God were very far away, but was stretching out his hand to enable us to grasp it. This is represented by the Vav of the Tetragrammaton, as I have discussed earlier. Indeed, the Kabbalists explicitly state that the expression Holy One, blessed be he, denotes the divine on the level of this Vav. Furthermore, the Zohar states that the Holy One, blessed be he, and the Torah are one. This is because the Torah is the means through which God reaches out to us from his transcendence. Indeed, the Torah uses anthropomorphisms to describe God primarily to make him more understandable and human to us and allow us to experience his immanence. The commandments in the Torah also serve as a link between God and human beings. The Kabbalistic meditation unifies the Holy One, blessed be he, with his divine presence. The Hebrew word for the divine presence is Shekhinah, which literally means that which dwells. The Shekhinah is a very important concept in Judaism in general. The Shekhinah is said to be wherever God's presence is manifest. Thus, it is taught that the Shekhinah was on Mount Sinai when God gave the commandments, and later in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Furthermore, when an individual experiences prophecy, it was said that the Shekhinah rested on him. Since the word Shekhinah comes from the root shachan, meaning to dwell, Shekhinah denotes that God appears to be dwelling in a certain place. But what does it mean when we say that God dwells in a place? It cannot be taken literally since God's essence fills all creation. When we say that God dwells in a certain place, we really mean that people can have an additional awareness of God there. Wherever the Shekhinah rests, there is an enhanced ability to experience the divine. When God allows his Shekhinah to rest in a certain place or situation, it is as if he were giving us a hand with which to receive the experience of the divine. This is represented by the last hay of the Tetragrammaton. Here again, the Kabbalists teach that the Shekhinah represents the same level of the divine as this final hay. Therefore, when this meditation speaks of uniting the Holy One, blessed be he, and his Shekhinah, it is speaking of uniting the levels of the Vav and the hay, the arm reaching out to us, and the hand that God gives us so that we may receive. Indeed, some versions of this meditation state explicitly that the Vav and the Hey are being united. Observing a commandment allows us to unite the male and female aspects of God's presence in the world. This is the essential purpose of keeping a commandment. God is always stretching out his arm to us, willing to give of his essence and spirituality. Before we can take it from him, we must have a vessel with which to hold it, a hand with which to receive. The way we do this is by making ourselves receptacles for the divine. God gives us the hand with which to receive the divine, but we must bring it together with the outstretched arm. The goal of the commandments is to unite the Vav and the Hey. When we say the above meditation, we should bear in mind that we are receptacles for the divine. Try to feel the great hollow inside yourself that can be filled only by God's essence, and more than anything in the world, yearn that this hollow be filled. At the same time, we should also be aware of God's presence all around us. We should contemplate the fact that God always wants to make himself available, but needs an act on our part. The commandments serve as this medium, and through them God's essence is brought into our being. Therefore, when performing any commandment or ritual, we should be aware that we are drawing into ourselves the light of the divine. The meditation goes on to say that the commandment is being done with love and awe. As we have seen, keeping a commandment can be a powerful expression of love. Love is the feeling that one wishes to unite with the divine. There must be a boundary on this love, or one can become swallowed up by it completely. Therefore, love for the divine must be balanced by awe. Love draws us closer to God, but awe keeps us from getting too close. When we learn to look at the rituals and commandments in this light, all of Judaism takes on new significance. We can see the commandments as the path that God Himself gave for us to come close to Him and experience His presence.